I was lounging on the couch, enjoying a quiet afternoon at home, when Alex walked in with a smile that lit up the entire room. "I have something important to tell you," he began, and my heart immediately started racing. I knew something big was about to happen. Alex sat down beside me, took my hands in his and looked me straight in the eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about our future," he said, "and I want you to know that I'm ready to take the next step." Tears welled up in my eyes as I processed his words. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" I asked, barely able to contain the joy bubbling inside me. Alex nodded and pulled me into a tight hug. "Yes, I want to spend the rest of my life with you," he whispered in my ear. In that moment it felt like the world had stopped. Everything I'd dreamed of since we first met was about to come true. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about our future. Alex told me he'd been saving up for the perfect ring and had even talked to my parents to ask for their blessing. I felt so loved and cherished. "I can't wait to see you wearing that ring," Alex said, and I couldn't stop smiling. That night as we lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the proposal. Where would it be? How would I react? My mind was spinning in 1,000 directions, but one thing was certain. I wanted to be ready. I wanted to look perfect, feel confident, and be prepared to say yes with all my heart. The next day I called my best friends to share the exciting news. "I can't believe it," Sarah squealed over the phone. "Finally. We knew this was coming." The girls were just as excited as I was, and we started making plans to ensure everything would be perfect. "You have to get a new dress," Emily suggested. "Something that makes you feel like a princess." As I hung up the phone, I felt overwhelmed with happiness. Alex and I had been through so much together, and now we were about to start a new chapter in our lives. I couldn't wait to see what the future held. The days following Alex's announcement were a whirlwind of excitement and anticipation. I couldn't stop thinking about the proposal, where it would happen, how it would happen, and most importantly, how I would look when it did. I wanted everything to be perfect. After all, this was going to be one of the most important moments of my life. I started by scrolling through Pinterest for outfit inspiration. I wanted something elegant but not over the top, something that would make Alex's jaw drop when he saw me. After hours of searching, I finally found the perfect dress. A sleek, off-the-shoulder number in deep emerald green. It was classy, timeless, and made me feel like $1,000,000. I ordered it immediately, crossing my fingers that it would fit just right. When the dress arrived, I tried it on in front of the mirror, twirling around like a kid on Christmas morning. "This is it," I whispered to myself, admiring how the fabric hugged my curves. My best friend, Sarah, FaceTimed me just as I was striking a dramatic pose. "Oh my God, you look stunning," she squealed. "Alex is going to lose his mind when he sees you in that." Sarah's enthusiasm was contagious, and soon enough the rest of my friends were in on the excitement. Emily offered to do my hair while Jess promised to handle my makeup. "You're going to look like a goddess," Jess said confidently. "Alex won't know what hit him." As the days went by, I found myself paying extra attention to every little detail. I booked a last-minute appointment at the salon for a fresh trim and even splurged on a mani-pedi. "You never know when he's going to pop the question," I told my friends during one of our group chats. "I need to be ready at all times." Alex, on the other hand, seemed unusually calm. He went about his days as if nothing had changed, which only made me more curious. Was he planning something elaborate? Or would he keep it simple and intimate? I tried to subtly fish for clues, but he was surprisingly good at dodging my questions. "You'll see," he'd say with a mysterious smile which only fueled my excitement. The night before the supposed proposal, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with possibilities. Would it be at dinner? During a walk in the park? Or maybe he'd recreate our first date. I replayed every romantic moment we'd ever shared, trying to guess what he might do. By the time the sun rose, I was both exhausted and exhilarated. The day of the proposal finally arrived, and I woke up with butterflies in my stomach. I spent the morning pampering myself, taking a long bubble bath and listening to my favorite playlist. When the girls arrived in the afternoon, they brought champagne and snacks, turning my apartment into a mini spa. "Today's the day," Emily cheered as she curled my hair. "I can't wait to hear all the details tomorrow." As I slipped into the emerald dress and looked at myself in the mirror, I felt a surge of confidence. This was it. My future with Alex was about to begin, and I was ready to say yes with all my heart. Little did I know the night would take a turn I could never have imagined. The day of the proposal felt like a dream. I woke up early, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. The sun was shining and the world seemed to hum with possibility. I kept replaying Alex's words in my head. I'm ready to take the next step. Today was the day everything would change. Alex had texted me the night before, telling me to meet him at La Belle Étoile, a fancy French restaurant downtown at 7 p.m., where something nice, he'd added with a wink emoji. I smiled at the memory. Of course I'd wear something nice. I'd spent days preparing for this moment. As I got ready, I couldn't help but notice how calm I felt. The dress fit perfectly, my hair fell in soft waves, and my makeup was subtle yet radiant. I looked like the version of myself I'd always imagined on this day. My friends had left earlier, promising to be on standby for my call as soon as it happened. Don't forget to text us the second he pops the question, Sarah had said, hugging me tightly before she left. At around 6 p.m. I grabbed my clutch, took one last look in the mirror and headed out the door. The restaurant wasn't far, but I wanted to arrive early. I wanted to savor every moment of this night. As I walked, I couldn't help but notice how beautiful the evening was. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the city buzzed with life. It felt like the universe was aligning for this moment. When I arrived at La Belle Étoile, the hostess greeted me with a warm smile. Right this way, she said, leading me to a secluded table near the back of the restaurant. The table was set with a white linen cloth, a single rose in a vase and 2 champagne flutes. My heart fluttered. Alex had thought of everything. I sat down, smoothing out my dress and glancing around the restaurant. It was elegant but not overly formal, with soft lighting and the gentle hum of conversation filling the air. I checked my phone. No messages from Alex. He was probably running late, I thought, trying to push away the tiny flicker of doubt that crept into my mind. As I waited, I sipped on a glass of water and watched the other diners. There was an elderly couple holding hands, a group of friends laughing over wine, and a young couple stealing glances at each other. I imagined Alex and I being like them someday, happy, in love, and building a life together. But as the minutes ticked by, my excitement began to wane. 7:15 p.m. No Alex. 7:30 p.m. Still no sign of him. I checked my phone again, wondering if I'd missed a text or call. Nothing. My stomach twisted with unease. This wasn't like him. Alex was always punctual, especially when it came to important plans. Just as I was about to text him, the hostess approached my table. Your party has arrived, she said with a polite smile. Relief washed over me and I turned toward the entrance, expecting to see Alex walking toward me with that familiar grin. But it wasn't Alex. At least not just Alex. He was with someone, a woman I'd never seen before. She was tall, with long blonde hair and a confident stride. They were laughing about something, completely oblivious to the fact that I was sitting there, waiting. My heart dropped to my stomach. Who was she? And why was she here? Alex finally noticed me and waved, his smile faltering slightly as he approached the table. Hey babe, he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. Sorry we're late. Traffic was a nightmare. I thought, my mind racing. I forced a smile, trying to hide my confusion. No problem, I said, my voice sounding far calmer than I felt. I was just enjoying the ambience. The woman extended her hand. Hi, I'm Claire, she said, her tone friendly but with an edge I couldn't quite place. Alex has told me so much about you. I shook her hand, my mind spinning. Why was she here? Was this some kind of surprise? A test? I glanced at Alex, searching for an explanation, but he was busy pulling out a chair for Claire. Claire's an old friend, he said casually, as if that explained everything. I thought it'd be nice for you two to meet. I nodded, trying to keep my composure, but inside I was screaming. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. Not at all. The soft hum of the restaurant wrapped around me like a warm blanket, but it did little to ease the growing knot in my stomach. I sat at the table, my fingers tracing the edge of the crisp white linen tablecloth, trying to distract myself from the ticking clock. The single rose in the vase seemed to mock me with its perfection, its petals too red, its scent too sweet. Everything about this moment felt off, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong spot. I glanced at my phone again. 7:45 p.m. Still no Alex. The champagne flutes sat untouched, their golden liquid catching the flicker of the candlelight. I wondered if I should text him, but something held me back. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the tiny voice in the back of my head whispering that something wasn't right. The restaurant was beautiful, though. La Belle Étoile had always been one of my favorite places, with its soft jazz music and walls adorned with black and white photographs of Paris. It was the kind of place where people came to celebrate anniversaries, promotions, engagements. I'd always imagined Alex proposing here, under the soft glow of the chandeliers, with the world feeling like it belonged only to us. But now, sitting here alone, the magic of the place felt distant, almost cold. I watched as the elderly couple at the next table shared a quiet laugh, their hands intertwined. The sight made my chest ache. That was supposed to be us. That was supposed to be tonight. I sipped my water, the ice cubes clinking against the glass, and tried to focus on the positives. Maybe Alex was stuck in traffic. Maybe he'd planned something elaborate and needed extra time. Or maybe, just maybe, this was all part of the surprise. I clung to that thought, letting it soothe the edges of my anxiety. But then I saw them. Alex walked in, his familiar stride confident and unhurried. My heart leapt for a moment, relief flooding through me, until I noticed the woman beside him. Claire. Her blonde hair caught the light as she laughed at something Alex said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. My stomach dropped. What was she doing here? And why did they look so comfortable together? Alex spotted me and waved, his smile wide but slightly strained. "Hey babe," he said as they reached the table. "Sorry we're late. Traffic was a nightmare." The word echoed in my head, sharp and unrelenting. I forced a smile, my cheeks aching with the effort. "No problem," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I was just enjoying the ambience. Claire extended her hand, her gray eyes cool and assessing. "Hi, I'm Claire," she said, her tone polite but with an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite place. "Alex has told me so much about you." I shook her hand, her grip firm and confident. "Nice to meet you," I replied, though the words felt hollow. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Was this some kind of test? A cruel joke? Or had I completely misread everything? Alex pulled out a chair for Claire, his movements smooth and practiced, as if this were a routine they'd done 100 times before. "Claire's an old friend," he explained, his tone casual, almost dismissive. "I thought it'd be nice for you two to meet." I nodded, my smile frozen in place. "Of course," I said, though my mind was screaming. "Why is she here? What is going on?" I glanced at Alex, searching for some clue, some explanation, but his attention was already on the menu, his expression unreadable. The waiter arrived, breaking the tension momentarily. "Can I get you started with some drinks?" he asked, his tone cheerful and oblivious to the undercurrents at the table. "Champagne," Alex said without hesitation, his eyes meeting mine for the first time since he'd arrived. "We're celebrating tonight." My heart skipped a beat. Celebrating what, exactly? I wanted to ask, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded, my smile brittle. "Champagne sounds perfect." As the waiter walked away, I caught Claire's gaze. She was studying me, her expression unreadable. There was something in her eyes, something that made my skin prickle. I looked away, focusing on the rose in the vase, its petals now seeming less perfect, more fragile. The night stretched ahead of me, heavy with unspoken questions and a growing sense of dread. Whatever was happening, one thing was clear. This wasn't the proposal I'd been waiting for. The champagne arrived, its bubbles rising to the surface like tiny, fleeting hopes. Alex raised his glass, his smile wide but not quite reaching his eyes. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice smooth and practiced. I clinked my glass against his, the sound sharp and hollow, while Claire followed suit, her movements deliberate and unhurried. I took a sip, the champagne bitter on my tongue despite its sweetness. My eyes darted between Alex and Claire, searching for answers in the way they interacted. They laughed at inside jokes I didn't understand, their voices blending together in a way that felt too familiar, too intimate. Every word, every glance felt like a needle pricking at my heart. "So Emma," Claire said, leaning forward slightly, her gray eyes locking onto mine. "Alex tells me you're a graphic designer. That's so creative. I could never do something like that. I'm more of a numbers person." Her tone was polite, but there was an edge to it, a subtle challenge that made my skin crawl. "It's not for everyone," I replied, forcing a smile. "But I love it. It lets me express myself in ways I can't with words." Alex nodded, his hand brushing against Claire's arm as he reached for the bread basket. Claire's a financial analyst, he said as if that explained everything. She's brilliant at what she does. Oh, stop, Claire said, laughing lightly, but her eyes gleamed with pride. You're making me sound like some kind of genius. I clenched my napkin under the table, my nails digging into the fabric. Why was he praising her like this? Why was she even here? The questions swirled in my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to ask them. Not yet. Not in front of her. The waiter returned, breaking the tension momentarily as he took our orders. I barely registered what I was saying, my mind too preoccupied with the way Alex's hand lingered near Claire's on the table, the way their laughter seemed to echo louder than anything else in the room. As the waiter walked away, Alex turned to me, his expression softening. You look beautiful tonight, Em, he said, his voice low and sincere. For a moment I felt a flicker of hope, a tiny spark that maybe, just maybe, this was all part of some grand plan. But then Claire chimed in, her voice cutting through the moment like a knife. She does, doesn't she? That dress is stunning. Where did you get it? I forced another smile, my cheeks aching from the effort. Just a little boutique downtown, I said, my tone clipped. It's nothing special. Well, it looks amazing on you, Claire said, her smile too wide, too bright. Alex is a lucky guy. The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded. I glanced at Alex, expecting him to say something, to defend me, to reassure me. But he just nodded, his attention already drifting back to Claire. The appetizers arrived, but I couldn't bring myself to eat. My stomach was in knots, my mind racing with possibilities. Was this some kind of test? A cruel joke? Or had I been blind to something that had been right in front of me all along? As the meal dragged on, the tension at the table grew thicker, almost suffocating. Claire dominated the conversation, her stories about her travels and career achievements painting her as some kind of flawless, untouchable figure. Alex hung on her every word, his admiration for her painfully obvious. I felt invisible, like a ghost at my own table. My hands trembled under the tablecloth, and I gripped the edge of my seat to steady myself. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. This wasn't the proposal I'd dreamed of. And then, just as the waiter cleared our plates, Alex stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. My heart leapt into my throat. Was this it? Was he finally going to propose? But instead of turning to me, he turned to Claire. I have something I need to say, he began, his voice trembling slightly. My breath caught in my chest as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Time seemed to slow as he dropped to one knee in front of her, the room fading away until it was just the three of us, locked in a moment that felt like a nightmare. Claire, he said, his voice steady now, you've been my best friend, my confidant, my everything. Will you marry me? The world shattered around me. The room spun, the sounds of the restaurant muffled and distant. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare as Claire's face lit up with joy. Yes, she said, her voice ringing out like a bell. Yes, of course. Alex slipped the ring onto her finger, and they embraced, their laughter and tears blending together in a moment that was supposed to be mine. I sat there, frozen, my heart breaking into a million pieces. And then, as if remembering I was there, Alex turned to me, his expression a mix of guilt and relief. Emma, he began, but I didn't let him finish. I stood up, my chair clattering to the floor behind me. Don't, I said, my voice trembling but firm. Don't you dare. And with that, I turned and walked out of the restaurant, the sound of their celebration fading behind me. The cold night air hit me like a slap as I stumbled out of the restaurant, my heels clicking sharply against the pavement. My vision blurred with tears, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not now. I could still hear the faint sound of laughter and clinking glasses from inside, a cruel reminder of the life I thought I was about to have, the life that had just been ripped away from me. I didn't know where I was going. My feet carried me aimlessly, my mind a whirlwind of disbelief and pain. How could this have happened? How could Alex do this to me? And who was Claire really? The questions pounded in my head, each one more suffocating than the last. My phone buzzed incessantly in my clutch, but I ignored it. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Not Alex, not my friends, not even myself. I just wanted to disappear, to melt into the night and never have to face what had just happened. But then, like a beacon in the darkness, I saw a small park up ahead. It was quiet, empty except for a few scattered streetlights casting long shadows across the grass. I made my way to a bench and sat down, my legs finally giving out beneath me. The tears came then, hot and uncontrollable, as the weight of everything crashed down on me. I replayed the scene in my mind over and over like a broken record. Alex's smile as he knelt in front of Claire. The way she'd looked at him like he was her entire world. The ring, sparkling on her finger as if it had always belonged there. And me sitting there like a fool, invisible and forgotten. My phone buzzed again, and this time I pulled it out. It was Sarah. I hesitated for a moment before answering, my voice trembling as I whispered, "Hey, Emma. Oh my God, are you okay? What happened?" Alex just called me and he sounded freaked out. He said you ran out of the restaurant and... He proposed to her. I interrupted, my voice breaking. He proposed to Claire. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. What? Oh, no way. Emma, that's not. It's true, I said, cutting her off again. I was there. I saw it. He got down on one knee and asked her to marry him. And she said yes. Sarah let out a string of curses, her voice rising with each word. I'm going to kill him. I swear, Emma, I'm going to. Don't, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Just, don't. I can't deal with that right now. I need to think. Sarah sighed, her tone softening. Hey, I get it. But you're not alone, okay? We're here for you. Whatever you need, we've got you. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Thanks, Sarah. I'll call you later, okay? Hey. But promise me you'll text if you need anything. Anything at all. I promise, I said before hanging up. I sat there for what felt like hours, the night wrapping around me like a blanket. The park was silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. It was peaceful, but the calm did little to ease the storm inside me. And then, just as I was starting to feel like I could breathe again, I heard footsteps approaching. My heart leapt into my throat and I turned, half expecting to see Alex standing there, ready to explain himself. But it wasn't Alex. It was Claire. She stood a few feet away, her blonde hair catching the light of the street lamp. She looked different now, softer, almost hesitant. Gone was the confident, almost smug demeanor she'd had at the restaurant. In its place was something I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Regret? Emma, she said, her voice quiet but steady. Can we talk? Claire's voice cut through the silence like a knife, and for a moment I couldn't move. My body froze, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. What was she doing here? What could she possibly have to say to me? And why did she look so vulnerable? Talk. I finally managed to say, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. What could you possibly have to say to me? She took a step closer, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I know you're hurt, she began, her tone careful, measured. And I know this looks bad. But it's not what you think. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound sharp and hollow in the quiet park. Not what I think. Are you serious? I just watched my boyfriend, no, my fiancé, propose to you. What exactly am I supposed to think? Claire flinched at my words but didn't back down. Alex and I, it's complicated, she said, her voice wavering slightly. We have history. A lot of history. And tonight, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. I stood up, my legs shaking beneath me, but I refused to let her see how much she'd rattled me. Oh really? How was it supposed to happen, Claire? Were you supposed to wait until after the wedding to tell me? Or were you just hoping I'd never find out? Her eyes widened, and for the first time I saw a flicker of guilt in them. No, Emma, it's not like that. Alex and I, we've been through a lot together. We've known each other for years. And tonight he got caught up in the moment. He didn't mean to hurt you. Didn't mean to hurt me? I repeated, my voice rising. Do you even hear yourself? He proposed to you in front of me, Claire. In front of me. How could he not mean to hurt me? She looked down, her shoulders slumping. I know it looks bad, she said quietly. But Alex loves you. He really does. He's just confused. Confused. I snapped, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. He's not confused, Claire. He made a choice. And so did you. There was a long silence, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Claire finally looked up, her gray eyes glistening with unshed tears. You're right, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We made a choice. And I'm not proud of it. But I need you to understand, this wasn't easy for me either. I stared at her, my chest heaving with the effort of holding back my anger. "Oh, I'm sure it was so hard for you," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Having the man I love propose to you in front of me. Poor Claire. However did you manage?" Her face flushed, and for a moment I thought she might snap back. But instead she took a deep breath and said, "I didn't come here to fight with you, Emma. I came here because I think you deserve to know the truth." "The truth?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "What truth? That you've been sneaking around with Alex behind my back? That you've been lying to me this whole time? Or is there some other bombshell you're waiting to drop?" Claire hesitated, her gaze dropping to the ground. "Alex and we've been seeing each other for a while," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "It started a few months ago. He said he was unhappy, that he felt like something was missing in your relationship. And I was stupid. I thought I could help him. I thought I could fix him." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, and I stumbled back, my legs giving out beneath me. I sank onto the bench, my mind reeling. "A few months," I whispered, my voice breaking. "You've been lying to me for months?" Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face now. "I know it's unforgivable," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "And I know I've hurt you. But I need you to understand. I never meant for this to happen. I never meant to fall in love with him." I looked up at her, my vision blurred with tears. "But you did," I said, my voice hollow. "You fell in love with him. And now he's yours." She didn't respond, and in that moment I realized there was nothing left to say. The truth was out, and it was worse than I could have ever imagined. Alex hadn't just betrayed me, he'd been lying to me for months. And Claire, she wasn't just some random girl. She was someone he'd known for years, someone he'd turned to when he felt like I wasn't enough. I stood up, my legs shaky but determined. "I hope he was worth it," I said, my voice cold and final. "Because you just lost the only friend you had in this mess." And with that I turned and walked away, leaving Claire standing alone in the park, her sobs echoing in the night. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. The thought of stepping into the apartment I shared with Alex, the apartment that still smelled like his cologne, still had his clothes strewn across the couch, made my stomach churn. Instead I went to Sarah's place. She didn't ask questions when she opened the door and saw me standing there, my face streaked with tears and my dress wrinkled from hours of wandering the city. She just pulled me into a tight hug and let me cry. By morning, the shock had worn off, replaced by a simmering anger that burned hotter with every passing second. I couldn't stop replaying Claire's words in my head. "Alex and we've been seeing each other for a while." How long had he been lying to me? How many times had he looked me in the eye and told me he loved me, all while sneaking around with her? The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible, and I knew I couldn't just let it go. I needed answers. I needed to face him. Sarah drove me to the apartment, her jaw clenched and her hands gripping the steering wheel like she was ready to punch someone. "Do you want me to come up with you?" she asked as we pulled into the parking lot. I shook my head. "No. This is something I need to do alone." She nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "Hey, but call me if you need me. And Emma, don't let him off easy. He doesn't deserve it." I didn't respond. I just got out of the car and walked into the building, my heart pounding with every step. By the time I reached our door, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the lock. But I took a deep breath, turned the knob, and stepped inside. Alex was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. He looked up when he heard the door open, his eyes bloodshot and his face pale. "Emma," he said, his voice hoarse. "I've been calling you all night. Where have you been?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, staring at him, trying to reconcile the man I thought I knew with the stranger sitting in front of me. "How long?" I finally asked, my voice cold and steady. He flinched. "Emma, How long, Alex?" I repeated, my voice rising. "How long have you been lying to me? How long have you been with her?" He looked down, his shoulders slumping. "A few months," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it's not what you think. Claire and we have history. It's complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, my voice trembling with anger. "You proposed to her, Alex. In front of me. How is that complicated?" "It's pretty damn clear to me." He stood up, his hands outstretched like he was trying to calm a wild animal. "Emma, please. Just let me explain. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen." Then why did it? I shot back, my voice breaking. Why did you do it, Alex? Was I not enough for you? Was our life together not enough? He hesitated, and in that moment I saw the truth in his eyes. He didn't have an answer. Or maybe he did, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. Either way, it didn't matter. The damage was done. I loved you, I said, my voice shaking. I trusted you. And you threw it all away for her. For someone you've known for years but never even bothered to tell me about. Do you have any idea how that feels? To find out that the person you thought you were going to spend the rest of your life with has been lying to you for months. He didn't respond. He just stood there, his face a mask of guilt and regret. And in that moment I realized something. I didn't need his apologies. I didn't need his excuses. I didn't need him. You know what the worst part is? I said, my voice steady now. It's not even that you cheated on me. It's that you made me feel like I wasn't enough. Like I wasn't worth fighting for. And that's something I'm never going to forget. He opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. Don't. Just don't. There's nothing you can say that's going to fix this. Nothing. I turned and walked into the bedroom, my hands trembling as I pulled a suitcase out of the closet. I didn't know where I was going to go, but I knew I couldn't stay here. Not in this apartment, not in this life. Alex followed me, his voice pleading. Emma, please. Don't do this. We can work through this. I love you. I do. I stopped packing and turned to face him, my eyes blazing. You don't get to say that to me, I said, my voice low and fierce. Not after what you've done. You don't get to tell me you love me when you've been lying to me for months. You don't get to pretend like this is something we can just fix. He stared at me, his face pale and his eyes wide. And for the first time I saw something in them that I hadn't seen before. Fear. Fear that he'd lost me. Fear that he'd ruined everything. But it was too late. I zipped up the suitcase and grabbed my coat, my heart pounding but my resolve unwavering. I'm done, Alex, I said, my voice steady. We're done. And with that I walked out the door, leaving him standing there alone and speechless. I didn't go far. Sarah's apartment became my temporary sanctuary, a place where I could fall apart without judgment. When I walked through her door, suitcase in hand, she didn't say a word. She just took the bag from me, set it down, and pulled me into a hug so tight it felt like she was holding me together. You're staying here, she said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. For as long as you need. I nodded, too exhausted to protest. The adrenaline from the confrontation with Alex had worn off, leaving me drained and hollow. Sarah led me to the couch, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and handed me a mug of tea. Drink this, she said. And then we're going to talk. Or not talk. Whatever you need. I sipped the tea, the warmth spreading through me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a flicker of comfort. Sarah sat down beside me, her presence steady and reassuring. Do you want to tell me what happened? She asked gently. I shook my head. Not yet, I whispered. I need a minute. She nodded, understanding without needing an explanation. We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the soft hum of the city outside. And then slowly the tears came. They started as a trickle, then turned into a flood, until I was sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. Sarah didn't say a word. She just held me, her hand rubbing soothing circles on my back. When the tears finally subsided, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. He proposed to her, I said, my voice hoarse. In front of me. And then I found out they've been together for months. He's been lying to me this whole time. Sarah's jaw tightened and I could see the anger flashing in her eyes. But she kept her voice calm. I'm so sorry, Emma. You didn't deserve that. No one does. I nodded, fresh tears spilling down my cheeks. I don't understand how he could do this. How he could throw away everything we had for her. Sarah sighed, her expression softening. Because he's an idiot, she said bluntly. And a coward. And you're way too good for him. I let out a shaky laugh, the sound surprising even me. Thanks, Sarah. Anytime, she said, grinning. Now what do you say we order some pizza and watch a movie? Something trashy and ridiculous to take your mind off things. I nodded, grateful for the distraction. We spent the rest of the night eating pizza, laughing at a terrible rom-com and talking about everything except Alex. For the first time in days I felt like I could breathe. The next morning, Emily and Jess showed up at Sarah's door, armed with coffee, pastries, and determined smiles. We heard what happened, Emily said, pulling me into a hug. And we're here for you. Whatever you need. Jess nodded, her usual bubbly demeanor replaced by a rare seriousness. Yeah. And if you want us to go egg his car or something, just say the word. I laughed, the sound genuine this time. Thanks, guys. But I think I'll pass on the vandalism. Your loss, Jess said, grinning. But seriously, Emma. You've got your back. Always. Over the next few days, my friends became my lifeline. They took turns staying with me, making sure I wasn't alone for too long. Emily dragged me to yoga classes, insisting that movement would help clear my mind. Jess forced me to go out for brunch even when I didn't feel like leaving the apartment. And Sarah? She was my rock, always there with a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on. One night, as we sat on Sarah's balcony staring up at the stars, I finally felt ready to talk about what had happened. I told them everything. The proposal, the confrontation with Claire, the fight with Alex. They listened without interrupting, their faces a mix of anger and sympathy. When I finished, Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. You're stronger than you think, Emma, she said. And you're going to get through this. We're going to make sure of it. Emily nodded. Yeah. And when you're ready, we'll help you figure out what's next. But for now, just focus on you. On healing. Jess grinned. And if you ever change your mind about egging his car, let me know. I laughed, the sound light and free. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I wasn't okay yet. Maybe I still had a long way to go. But with my friends by my side, I knew I'd get there. The days turned into weeks, and slowly the sharp edges of my pain began to dull. It wasn't a linear process. Some days I felt like I was making progress, and others I felt like I was back at square one. But my friends never let me stay in that dark place for too long. They were always there, pulling me back into the light. One morning, I woke up to a text from Emily. Yoga at 10. No excuses. I groaned, burying my face in the pillow. The thought of leaving the apartment still felt daunting, but I knew Emily wouldn't take no for an answer. Reluctantly, I dragged myself out of bed, threw on some leggings and headed to the studio. The class was harder than I expected. My body felt stiff and uncooperative, like it had forgotten how to move. But as I followed the instructor's calm voice, focusing on my breath and the stretch of my muscles, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about Alex or Claire or the mess my life had become. I was just present. After class, Emily handed me a smoothie and grinned. See? I told you it would help. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help smiling. Hey, you were right. I'm always right, she said, laughing. But seriously, Emma. You looked good in there. Like you were starting to find your footing again. Her words stayed with me as I walked home. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was starting to find my footing. It was a small step, but it was a step nonetheless. That afternoon, Jess showed up at Sarah's apartment with a stack of magazines and a determined look on her face. We're redecorating, she announced. Your room specifically. It's too depressing in there. I raised an eyebrow. Pie room. Yes, your room, she said, plopping down on the couch. You've been living out of a suitcase for weeks. It's time to make this space yours. Even if it's just temporary. I hesitated. The idea of unpacking, of settling in, felt like admitting defeat. Like I was giving up on the life I'd had with Alex. But Jess wasn't having it. Come on, Emma, she said, her tone softening. You deserve to feel at home. Wherever you are. So we spent the afternoon rearranging furniture, hanging pictures and adding little touches that made the room feel like mine. By the time we were done, it was cozy and inviting, a far cry from the sterile space it had been before. As I stood in the doorway surveying our work, I felt a flicker of pride. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That night, Sarah cooked dinner, a rare occurrence since she usually lived off takeout. We sat around the table, laughing and talking like nothing had changed. But something had changed. I could feel it. The heaviness that had been weighing me down for weeks was starting to lift, replaced by a sense of possibility. After dinner, I found myself scrolling through job listings. I hadn't thought much about work since everything had happened, but now the idea of a fresh start, a new project, a new challenge felt appealing. I bookmarked a few positions and made a mental note to update my resume. As I got ready for bed that night, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My hair was a mess and there were dark circles under my eyes, but for the first time in a long time I didn't look away. I looked at myself, really looked, and saw not just the pain and the heartbreak but also the strength it had taken to get through it. I wasn't the same person I'd been before all of this. I wasn't sure who I was yet, but I was starting to figure it out. And that was enough. The weeks turned into months, and slowly but surely I began to feel like myself again. Not the version of myself I'd been with Alex, but someone new, someone stronger, braver, and more in tune with who I really was. It wasn't an easy journey, but with the support of my friends and a newfound sense of determination, I started to rebuild my life on my own terms. One of the first things I did was take a solo trip. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a weekend getaway to a nearby coastal town, but it felt like a big step. I'd always been the kind of person who relied on others for company, but this time I wanted to prove to myself that I could be alone without feeling lonely. The trip was exactly what I needed. I spent my days wandering the beach, collecting seashells, and reading books I'd been meaning to get to for years. I ate at little cafes, struck up conversations with strangers, and even tried surfing for the first time. It was exhilarating, doing things just for me without worrying about what anyone else thought. When I got back, I felt like a different person. Lighter, freer, and more confident. My friends noticed the change too. "You look happy," Sarah said one evening as we sat on her balcony, sipping wine and watching the sunset. "Like really happy. It's good to see." I smiled, leaning back in my chair. "I feel happy. Or at least I'm getting there." Around the same time, I started exploring new hobbies. I'd always loved photography but had never made time for it. So I signed up for a class at a local studio and quickly became obsessed. There was something magical about capturing moments. The way the light hit a building, the expression on someone's face, the quiet beauty of everyday life. It gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I also reconnected with an old passion, painting. I hadn't picked up a brush in years, but one rainy afternoon I found myself standing in front of a blank canvas, lost in the rhythm of creating. It was messy and imperfect, but it was mine. And that was enough. Work became another source of fulfillment. I'd landed a freelance project with a small design agency, and the creative freedom it offered was exactly what I needed. I threw myself into the work, pushing myself to try new styles and techniques. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of what I was accomplishing. But perhaps the biggest change was in how I saw myself. I'd spent so much of my life defining myself through my relationships. First as Alex's girlfriend, then as his ex. But now I was starting to see myself as someone independent, someone capable of standing on my own 2 feet. It was a powerful feeling, one that gave me the courage to start dreaming again. One evening, as I sat on the balcony with Sarah, I found myself talking about the future in a way I hadn't in months. "I've been thinking about traveling," I said, my voice tinged with excitement. "Maybe Europe. Or South America. I don't know. I just feel like there's so much out there, you know? And I want to see it all." Sarah grinned, raising her glass. "To new adventures," she said. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling a surge of gratitude for the life I was building. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but in some ways it was better. It was mine. A year had passed since that night at the restaurant, and in many ways it felt like a lifetime. I'd changed in ways I never could have imagined. Not just in how I lived my life, but in how I saw myself. I was no longer the girl who'd been blindsided by betrayal. I was someone stronger, someone who'd faced the worst and come out the other side. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when I ran into Alex. I was walking through the park, my camera slung over my shoulder, when I saw him sitting on a bench, staring at the lake. For a moment I considered turning around and walking the other way. But then I stopped myself. I wasn't that person anymore. The one who ran from hard things. So I took a deep breath and walked over. "Hey," I said, my voice steady. He looked up, startled, and for a moment we just stared at each other. He looked different, older maybe, or just tired. There was a sadness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Emma," he said, his voice soft. "Hi." I sat down on the bench beside him, leaving a careful distance between us. The silence stretched for a moment, heavy with unspoken words. Finally he spoke. "How have you been?" I smiled, a small, genuine smile. "I've been good. Really good, actually." He nodded, his gaze dropping to his hands. "I'm glad. You look happy." "I am," I said, and I meant it. It took a while, but I got there. He hesitated, then said, "I've wanted to reach out to you so many times. To apologize. To explain. But I didn't know how." I shook my head. You don't need to explain, Alex. Not anymore. I've made my peace with what happened. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. I'm sorry, Emma. For everything. I never meant to hurt you. I believed him. But it didn't change anything. I know, I said quietly. But it's in the past now. We've both moved on. He nodded, his expression a mix of relief and regret. Claire and I, it didn't work out. I think I always knew it wouldn't. I was just too scared to admit it. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth was I'd stopped caring about Alex and Claire a long time ago. Their story was theirs, not mine. We sat in silence for a while, watching the leaves fall from the trees and drift across the surface of the lake. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't expected. Finally, I stood up, slinging my camera back over my shoulder. Take care of yourself, Alex, I said. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. You too, Emma. I walked away then, my steps light and my heart full. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I was finally free, not just from Alex but from the weight of everything that had happened. I'd found myself again, and in doing so, I'd discovered a strength I didn't know I had. As I left the park, I pulled out my camera and snapped a photo of the lake, the golden light of the setting sun reflecting off the water. It was beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. Life was like that, I realized. Messy and complicated, but also full of moments of unexpected beauty. And I was ready to embrace all of it.